Most people think they lose in relationships because they love too much. Sun Tzu would say that's not the problem. The problem is that you never chose the battlefield. Or maybe you already know this relationship isn't working. You've known for a while. And the real question, the one you haven't asked yourself honestly, is why you're still showing up anyway. Sun Tzu never wrote about love, but the single most ignored lesson in the art of war is the exact reason why smart, capable, deeply feeling people keep losing in relationships, and almost nobody is talking about it. By the end of this video, you will have 3 things. First, you will know exactly why you keep losing in the same relationships, not because of bad luck, not because you're too much or not enough, but because of something far more fundamental that nobody ever shows you. Second, you will be able to identify before you are in too deep 3 specific types of people that Sun Tzu would tell you never to fight for. And there is a real chance that right now, today, you are already in a battle with one of them. Third, you will have a decision-making framework so precise that the next time you feel yourself walking toward a battlefield that isn't yours, you will recognize it, before you've spent everything trying to win it. Most people will never ask the question I'm about to show you. The ones who do will never look at relationships or any decision that costs them something the same way again. The first time you watch this, you will hear it as a framework. The second time, you will hear it as a mirror. The 3 questions at the end of this video will change how you make every major decision, not just in relationships. Stay with it. This video is not for everyone. It is for the person who is tired of giving their energy to the wrong place. If you're still watching, you already know which person that is. Sun Tzu never wrote about love. He never wrote about heartbreak, or why you keep choosing the wrong person, or what it feels like to be the only one trying. But here is what he did write about, and what almost everyone misses. He didn't give you rules. He didn't offer moral lessons or philosophical theories about how people should behave. He gave you a decision-making framework, a way of looking at any situation, any conflict, any investment of energy, any moment where you are about to commit yourself to something, and asking one question before you do. One question, that's all. Is this worth it? Not in a romantic sense, in a real sense. What does this person actually add to your life? Not what they promised, not what they used to be. Right now, are you more stable or less, more energy or less? Is your bank account growing or bleeding? Are you becoming more of who you want to be or shrinking? Sun Tzu was not sentimental about this. He calculated, he assessed. He looked at the actual return on the actual investment and made his decision from there. The most dangerous thing you can do in a relationship is make your decisions based on potential rather than evidence. Potential feels like hope. Evidence feels like truth. That is the entire foundation of the art of war. Sun Tzu's framework is not about winning. It is about the intelligent allocation of energy, where you put it, when you commit it, and whether the return justifies the cost. Not how to fight harder, not how to defeat your enemy, but whether this particular battle deserves your commitment at all. You may have always thought the art of war was written for generals, for boardrooms, for people playing games you're not part of. It was written for you. This video will show you the most stripped-down, practical version of Sun Tzu you have ever seen. No history, no theory, just the framework, applied to the one battlefield that almost everyone ignores until it has already cost them everything. There is a kind of person who never reaches this level of exhaustion, not because they love less, but because before they invest, they ask the question most people never think to ask. Is this battlefield worth entering? And before you answer, understand that this question is not only about relationships. It is about every place you are currently spending your energy, your career, your friendships, the projects you keep showing up for, every situation where you are giving your time, your money, your attention, without ever stopping to ask whether what you are getting back justifies what you are putting in. Sun Tzu was not writing about love. He was writing about your life. This is not a romantic question, but it is the question that separates the people who keep losing from the people who don't. Carl Jung said something that most people hear but very few actually understand. He said, "Whatever you cannot see in yourself will appear in your life as fate." Here is what that actually looks like. You leave one relationship. You tell yourself, next time will be different. 6 months later, you are sitting across from someone new, different name, different face, and you are having the exact same argument, feeling the exact same way, asking yourself the exact same question, how did I end up here again? That is not bad luck. That is a pattern Jung was talking about. The pattern starts much earlier than the relationship. It starts with what you learned love feels like. Maybe you grew up in a house where affection arrived unpredictably, some days warm, other days cold, and you didn't know why. So you learned to read the room, you learned to adjust. You learned that if you said the right thing, stayed small enough, tried hard enough, you could bring the warmth back. That skill kept you safe as a child, but it became a trap as an adult. Because now you call that feeling chemistry, you call it intensity, you call it love. But it's not love, it's familiarity. You are drawn to people who are just out of reach, people who run hot and cold, people who make you feel, just often enough, that if you try a little harder, they will finally choose you. You think you're choosing a person, you're actually replaying a pattern. You checked your phone, waiting for a reply that never came. You rehearsed conversations in your head, adjusting your tone, softening your words, so they wouldn't pull away. You felt something was wrong, but you talked yourself out of it, because the good moments felt like proof that you were almost there. That is not a character flaw. That is a wound that never got named. Same wound, different name. Jung called this the shadow, the part of yourself you cannot see, acting out in every choice you make. Researchers studying decision-making discovered something called the optimal stopping theory, also known as the 37% rule. The math says this: spend the first 37% of your search purely observing, not committing, not deciding, just building a real, honest picture of what you actually need, what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel seen, what kind of dynamic brings out the best in you. Then, the first person who genuinely meets that standard is the one worth committing to. But here is what the math cannot tell you. Most people never complete the first 37%, not because they don't meet enough people, because they never actually observe. They never stop to ask, does this person make my life better? Do I feel more like myself around them or less? They fall into patterns instead of studying them. The observation never happened, so the pattern never broke. Jung would say, you cannot complete the 37% until you can see what you have been doing inside it. The framework is not the problem. The self-awareness is. The first step toward choosing your battlefield is not finding a better person. It is seeing clearly, without defense, what you have been doing and why. Before we go further, I want you to stop for a moment. Think about the relationship that cost you the most, not the one that ended the most dramatically, the one that drained you the quietest. You rearranged your schedule around their availability. You held back things you wanted to say. You spent entire evenings trying to read what their silence meant. You woke up in the morning already calculating what kind of mood they would be in. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, you stopped asking whether this was working. You only asked what else you could do to make it work. That is the cost you may not have added up yet. Not just the time, not just the energy, not just the money, the dinners, the trips, the gifts, the opportunities you didn't pursue, but the version of yourself you placed on hold, the friendships that quietly faded, the goals you kept pushing back, every unit of energy you spent monitoring their mood, adjusting your behavior, waiting. That energy did not disappear. It compounded into exhaustion. Sun Tzu wrote that lengthy campaigns exhaust a state faster than any enemy ever could. A prolonged battle does not just cost resources, it costs the will to fight at all. The relationships that drain you the most are not the ones that ended badly. They are the ones that went on too long, and that cost compounds. Every year spent in the wrong place is a year not spent building toward the right one. Every piece of yourself you gave to someone who could not receive it was a piece that was not available for someone who could. The question is not whether you can afford to leave. The question is whether you can afford to stay. People reveal who they are not through what they say, but through what they repeatedly do. But before we talk about the three types of people, there is something about relationships that almost nobody says out loud. Most relationship pain does not come from a lack of love. It comes from a power imbalance that nobody names. Whoever needs the other person more holds the weaker position. That is not cynicism. That is the structure of almost every difficult relationship dynamic you have ever experienced. People do not act from emotion alone. They act from interest. How you are treated is not determined by how much you give. It is determined by the value you represent to the other person and whether they believe they can do better or cannot afford to lose you. This is uncomfortable, but it explains everything. You gave everything, you showed up, you were loyal, consistent, present, and then they left. Not for someone better, for someone who, by almost any measure, had less to offer than you did. And that specific, devastating confusion is actually the clearest proof of what we're talking about. They didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because the structure of that relationship had quietly shifted. You needed them more than they needed you. And once that imbalance was large enough, the quality of what you offered stopped mattering. You may be sitting there thinking, this is too calculating. Love should not work this way. But don't think about what you believe. Think about what you have actually experienced. Every time you stayed somewhere too long and watched your leverage disappear. Every time someone treated you differently the moment you stopped needing them as much. Every time the person who seemed least available held the most power in the room. You already know this is how it works. You have seen it your entire life. You just never had a framework that named it clearly enough to act on. Sun Tzu named it 2,500 years ago. The world has not changed. In relationships, there are certain patterns that tell you, if you are willing to read them, that you have entered a battlefield that was never designed for you to win. The first is the person whose words and actions never align. They tell you they care, but nothing changes. They tell you things will be different, but the same patterns repeat. Explanations are always more abundant than changes. When you raise a concern, they have an answer for everything, and that answer becomes a mechanism of control. It keeps you managing your own doubts instead of reading the evidence in front of you. You start to wonder if you're being too sensitive, too demanding, too much. You're not. You're just reading the wrong data. This is the experience of being deceived, not through one dramatic betrayal, but through 1,000 small adjustments that never add up to the person they promise to be. Stop listening to what they say. Start asking what they gain by keeping you exactly where you are. The second is the person who requires constant proof. You met the standard, and then it moved. With this person, there is always one more way you have fallen short. You did everything right. Still wasn't enough. You apologized. They stayed cold. You changed. They found something new to criticize. You are being drained. And the worst part is that it happens so gradually you don't notice, until there is almost nothing left. The third is the person who appears when you have something to give and disappears when you need something back. You were struggling. You reached out. They were busy. You were doing well. You had something to offer. Suddenly, they were very available. The reasons are always reasonable. The disappearance is always explained. But the pattern is clear if you are willing to see it. This is the experience of being used, of having your presence valued not for who you are, but for what you can provide at any given moment. The gap here is awareness. The moment you see these patterns clearly, not with anger, not with blame, but with the clear eyes of someone honestly assessing a battlefield, you gain something most people in relationships never have: the ability to choose before the cost becomes irreversible. Sun Tzu did not train generals to fight harder. He trained them to think before they fought. And there is something else that the ancient strategists understood, something that applies directly to every relationship you have ever been in. Your strength does not come from how hard you try. It comes from the position you occupy. In relationships, that position is determined by one thing: whether you genuinely have your own life, your own direction, your own income, your own ability to walk away, or whether you are holding on because you have nothing else. Without that, without a life that exists independently of the relationship, there is no equality. There is only one person who needs and one person who decides. He wrote, "The victorious warrior wins first, then goes to war. The defeated warrior goes to war first, then seeks to win." Most people in relationships are operating on the second model. They fall in, they commit emotionally, they invest deeply. And then, somewhere in the middle of the wreckage, they begin to wonder whether this was a good idea. The person who operates on the first model does something different. They observe before they invest. They look at patterns, not promises. The general who selects the right battlefield does not lose less often because they are lucky. They lose less because they refuse to fight battles they cannot win. And when they do lose, because everyone loses sometimes, they do not lose the same battle twice. This is not coldness. This is not the absence of love. This is what it looks like when someone finally decides that their energy, their time, and their emotional world are worth protecting. Attraction. Most advice treats it as something you manufacture. Be less available, make them chase you, follow the rules. Sun Tzu would find this almost embarrassingly ineffective. Here is the paradox most people miss. You canceled plans with a friend to be available for them. They appreciated it for a day, then they stopped noticing. You checked in more, they responded less. You made yourself easier to reach, they became harder to hold. The harder you tried, the less magnetic you became. The most attractive person in any dynamic is not the one who performs attraction best. It is the person who is clearly, unmistakably going somewhere, with or without you. 3 things create this quality. None of them are techniques. The first is direction. You are moving towards something that exists independently of any relationship. When they ask what you've been up to, you actually have an answer. The second is genuine scarcity of attention. Not manufactured distance, real engagement with things that matter to you. You don't respond to every message within 30 seconds, not because you're playing a game, but because you're actually doing something. The third is emotional stability. You can receive coldness without collapsing. You can receive warmth without losing your judgment. You don't send 3 follow-up messages when one goes unanswered. Sun Tzu called this appearing weak while being strong. You are not performing strength. You are not pretending. You are building something. And that, only that, is the form of attraction that lasts. Everything in this video comes down to 3 questions, not theories. 3 questions you can ask yourself right now. The first question is about you. Am I choosing this person, or am I replaying a pattern? Is the pull you feel coming from genuine connection, or does it feel familiar in a way that has more to do with your history than with them? This is the hardest question, because it requires you to look at yourself before you look at them. The second question is about them. Do their actions over time tell the same story as their words, not on their best day, consistently, when there is no audience, when you actually need something, when it would be inconvenient for them to show up? Do they? Write it down if you have to, not the things they said, the things they did. The third question is about the battlefield itself. If things stay exactly as they are right now, not as you hope they will become, not as they were in the beginning, but as they actually are today, is this somewhere you want to be? This is the question most people never ask, because asking it honestly means letting go of the future you have been constructing in your mind as a reason to stay. Because energy spent on the wrong battlefield is not just lost, it is unavailable for the right one. 3 questions about yourself, about them, about the reality of where you are standing right now. Ask them before you invest another year. The general who asks these questions before the battle is the one who does not lose the same war twice. There are 2 kinds of people who will reach this point in the video. The first kind will feel resistance. They will say, "This is too cold. Love should not be calculated." But the second kind will feel something different. They will feel, for the first time, a language for something they have known for a long time but could never quite put into words. The exhaustion of being the one who always texts first. The confusion of loving someone who seems to need you but never quite chooses you. The slow, quiet erosion that happens when you spend too long in a place that was never built for you to stay. If you are the second kind, then what you have heard today is not a strategy for loving less. It is permission. Permission to see clearly. Permission to choose. Permission to stop spending yourself in wars that were never yours to fight. You have been fighting in the wrong place. The person who chooses their battlefield is not the person who loves less. They are the person who finally has something left to give, when they find somewhere worth giving it. Now here is the part that most people skip, and skipping it is exactly the problem. Most people do not end up in the wrong relationships because they are not smart enough. They end up there because they are lazy at the most important moment. Not lazy in the relationship, lazy before it, lazy at the assessment, lazy at the observation. It is easier to feel the pull and follow it. It is easier to stay in something familiar. It is easier to run on hope than to sit with the discomfort of evidence. And that laziness has a price, not today, but compounded over years. Here is the part that makes this even harder to hear. When a relationship is assessed, when a job evaluates you, when an opportunity sizes you up, when someone new decides in the first 30 seconds whether you are worth their time, they will not factor in how much you gave. They will not count the years you stayed. They will not weigh the sacrifices you made. They will only see who you are right now, what you have built, what you carry with you. Your past effort is invisible to everyone except you. This is not unfair. This is how value actually works. Look at 2 people 10 years from now. The first person, the one who kept following the feeling, who kept telling themselves next time will be different, is still dating, still checking their phone first thing in the morning, still spending money they don't have on something that takes more than it gives. Nothing changed. Still explaining themselves to people who were never really listening. Still waking up tired in a way that sleep does not fix. Still saying, "I just haven't met the right person yet." The second person, the one who chose to see clearly, who chose evidence over hope, looks completely different. Elle Woods didn't become a great lawyer because she got the guy. She became one because she stopped fighting for someone who had already decided she wasn't enough, and redirected every unit of that energy toward a battlefield that was actually hers. They are in a relationship that actually feels like rest, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of genuine support. When something goes wrong at work, they have someone to call. When they need silence, they get silence without it meaning something is broken. They are not managing the other person's emotions as a second job. Their finances are growing, not because they earned more, because they stopped bleeding money into relationships that were draining them. Their work is better because the first hour of their morning belongs to them. Their friendships are real because they finally had the energy to show up for people who had always shown up for them. And when they look in the mirror, the person looking back actually resembles the person they always meant to become. The difference between these two people is not intelligence. It is not talent. It is not even luck. It is one decision made earlier. The decision to stop being lazy at the most important assessment of all. The person who chose the wrong battlefield for 5 years does not just lose 5 years. They lose the version of themselves that those 5 years could have built. The person who chose the right one does not just gain a relationship, they gain back their energy, their focus, their money, their time, and the compounding interest on all of it. 5 years from now, you will look back at the relationships that cost you the most. You will see that the greatest loss was not the relationship itself, not the time, not the pain, not the version of yourself you gave away trying to make something work. The greatest loss was the compounding cost. Every year spent in the wrong place was a year not spent building toward the right one. You will see the conversations you didn't have because you were afraid of the answer, the decisions you delayed because leaving felt like failure, the person you could have been becoming, quietly waiting while you were trying to win a battle that was already over before it started. The strongest person in any conflict is not the one who fights the hardest. It is the one who chose the battlefield. That clarity is not coldness. It is the most profound form of self-knowledge there is, and it is available to you. Starting now, if this way of thinking resonates, this channel is built for exactly that. Every video takes one principle from Sun Tzu's Art of War and strips it down to its most practical form. No history lectures, no academic theory, just the framework applied to the decisions you are actually making. Subscribe, and the next time you are standing at a decision that costs something, you will have a different set of eyes to see it with. And before you go, leave a comment. Which battlefield are you still fighting on?